You know, I was like, well, then I'm going to play in the CFL. Like, I just wanted to always challenge the power of the female with being able to keep up with the boys.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so I always had this desire, you know. That's why I always competed with my brother.
Okay.
I was like, if he can do it, then I can do it, and I'm going to do it better.
Hey, thanks for clicking on the 168th episode of the Athletes Podcast today. We have the honor of featuring Jen Kish, a former Canadian Sevens rugby player who was the captain of the national team in 2016 when they went down to Rio to compete in the Olympics, and they won the bronze medal. You'll see her and her partner, Shawnee Kish, on TikTok creating some crazy cool content. I highly recommend you go check them out there. This episode is also brought to you by Rooted. If you enter the code AP18 at checkout, you're gonna get 18% off both men's and women's. Say goodbye to sugary sports drinks, try out Rooted. I guarantee you'll feel better after taking it. Provides you 3 times the electrolytes of those sugary sports drinks, 24 vitamins and minerals, as well as 9 superfoods and probiotics. In today's conversation, we dive deep into Jen's experiences playing rugby. Her experiences as a team captain, transitioning from the sport of football to rugby, having her coaches tell her things that she could and couldn't do. Frankly, probably some things that everyone's experienced as an athlete growing up. But she shines a really cool light on how she was able to take that information, use it as motivation, and use that adversity as fuel. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. Stay tuned for more engaging content on our social media platforms. It would mean the world for us if you were able to hit that follow button, subscribe wherever you're watching our content. We actually have an athletes agreement. I know most things on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, they're free. Not this one. We ask you, if you've watched 1 or more episodes of the Athletes Podcast, you hit that subscribe button. It's our athletes agreement. Everyone's doing it. I just appreciate it. It means the world to us. I do have to give credit, My First Million. They were the ones who introduced it, got the idea. So now we've introduced the athletes agreement to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to the 168th episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Jen Kish. Here we go. Yeah, I'm excited to welcome you to the show, finally get you on the Athletes Podcast. Why don't you start off by introducing yourself to our audience, who you are, your experience, Canadian bronze medalist, team captain, Canada. How else would you describe you as an introduction?
You know, it's so funny. Every time someone's like, who are you? And it's like, that is such a loaded question. Mm-hmm. But to sum it up, so my name is Jen Kish, and I played professional rugby for 13 years. Or maybe it was 15. I don't know. I started when I was 15, made the team, and then retired just before 30. You know, I was the captain of the women's rugby sevens team, won a Olympic bronze medal. I went to the Pan Am Games, won gold. We were like basically, when I was playing, we were trailblazers in the sport. But yeah, just like your average person. It's like going after.
Your average humble person, clearly.
It's really hard to describe myself. Most times I really don't like to talk about myself.
Well, hopefully in the next 45 minutes I can pull a bit out of you in the meantime.
I'm going to try.
You have a pretty incredible story, to say the least, being born in Ottawa, transitioning out to Alberta, back here to Ontario. We're here at Spencer's, incredible restaurant. They've posted us up here in the observatory. First question I got to ask, I was scrolling through TikTok. Does Vaseline belong on our face?
You know, it's 50-50.
Okay.
I know, you know what's so funny? My wife, Shawnee, because it's her account we use, she's not a big fan of TikTok, and I'm like, TikTok is like a really good platform for like to do free campaigns in that sense, you know, like promote yourself, and you can touch so many people worldwide for free. And she was like, we were having this debate of, you know, she looks really young. Yeah. She is young. I'm young too.
For sure.
But you know, I was like, you don't have any wrinkles. And we met somebody else who didn't have wrinkles, and we're like, what do you do? And she used to put egg yolk on her face. Okay. And this other lady said, I put Vaseline. Anyways, put it on TikTok, and it just was, you know, it was an uproar with people. Yeah. Like, they were like, don't do it. Yes, you should. And I'm like, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't do it.
Okay.
I go other avenues, Botox.
I had to ask. It was blowing up. I love the way you guys interact on your social media. I think it's so much fun. It's like refreshing to see. You guys are like, you just like randomly show her off and she starts singing. She's throwing shit at you. It's awesome.
Oh my God, I'm so blessed to have such a talented, beautiful wife. I have to say, like, I really lucked out. And I love that her and I have this playful relationship where we can laugh and have fun, and people, when they see it, you know, they can feel that vibe that we have.
Yeah, and it's also cool. You get to like get on the radar of a Skip the Dishes, which I'm sure, like, when you get that
I know.
like, I'm sure that they love that.
She uses Skip the Dishes for everything, or what, Uber?
Yeah.
Is it Uber?
Uber Eats,
Uber
maybe.
Eats?
Yeah.
I don't know. She ordered like hair dye.
Yeah, that's the one I was referencing.
To the door, and I was like, what? She's like, I just didn't have time to go get it. And I was like, well, that's actually really smart.
Yeah.
But like, they're upcharging for that.
Yeah,
She's
what are they,
like,
11?
Time versus money. And I was like, yeah, you make a good point.
Well, hey, I don't want to talk all about social media, but one of the things that we like to showcase is like not just the athlete, the individual, but you know what you're doing currently. Obviously, you retired a couple of years ago, but let's talk about what it meant for you in 2015 to win gold at the Toronto Pan Am Games, 2016 representing your country. Like, these are no small feats, and for you to say you're just an average, regular person is obviously being very humble. But maybe let's start from the beginning. Who was Jen Kish growing up? What sports were you playing? How were you becoming this individual that you are today?
Yeah, so I had so I was born in Ottawa, was there for just like a blip of a minute. I lived all across Canada because my dad, single dad, had, went wherever there was work. But we ended up, home base was Edmonton. And we were poor, very, very poor. So I was never able to join a organized sport. So I was like at a young age, my dad would get me like a soccer ball or a basketball and a hockey stick and some skates and a puck. And I would just go after school or before school and, play by myself or try to play with other people. And it was also, I used sport as an outlet. Like, I had a pretty chaotic childhood. So I really just put all my energy into the skills of sport. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older where my dad kind of put me in Taekwondo to defend myself, because he was never really around because he was working. And I ended up, look, he's calling me right now. His ears are burning.
Oh, that's
I haven't talked to him in a couple weeks, and he's calling. Yeah,
Papa Kish.
Papa Kish. So he put me in Taekwondo, and I did that for a few years and got my second-degree black belt.
Good for you. Wow.
Yeah, and I ended up becoming the Alberta provincial champion when I was 12.
No big deal.
But it got serious. It got too serious. They're like, wow, this kid's really good, and they started to push me into it on a more serious level to, go to the Olympics, like the Junior Olympics. And I was so young, and I did Taekwondo because I enjoyed it, not because I wanted to win.
Took the fun out of it?
Yeah, so I left Taekwondo, and everything that my brother did, I wanted to do.
Right.
So then he was in Taekwondo, and I basically drove him out of the sport just because I was better than him.
Right.
And so he joined football. And then I was like, oh my God, I want to play football.
Yeah.
And so I played football with him, and then he left the sport. He got into video games, and thank God I don't really like video games. So I started joining all these other sports. So I had a diverse background in multiple sports that allowed me to have multiple skills, and found rugby. My football coach was actually a rugby player, and he was like, you're good at football, but you're eventually not going to be able to keep up.
Right.
With the size of the guys and versus my size. And every time I was getting hit, I was getting a concussion.
Oh.
Just because I just was so much smaller.
Yeah.
I didn't have as much mass on me. And he's like, I have a sport for you, it's called rugby. And I was like, what's rugby, And so he's like, just give it a go. And so I did, and played high school rugby. I was really good at it, didn't know any of the rules, got a lot of penalties. People didn't like that. But I played hard, and I had to learn. And then from there, I kind of just, I I joined club, and there was my high school coaches. I joined their club.
Okay.
And one of them played for Team Canada. And I didn't even know that Canada had a rugby team. And I was like, wow, okay, I can do that. And rugby's cheap. All you need is a pair of cleats, and you pay club fees.
Okay.
And I was like, my dad's like, yeah, we can do that. And I was like, sweet. So that's kind of how my rugby career started. And I was just, basically flying around the world at 15 for many, many years. And I ended up getting, I joined provincial and got scouted and made Canada, and
rest is history.
The rest is history.
It's crazy when I think about, what a pivotal age that would have been at 12 years old. You had decisions that you realistically could have changed the trajectory of your life.
For a very long time, I was having nightmares I always wanted to go to the Olympics when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Like when I was like in grade 2, they were like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And list your 3 goals. And I was like, I want to be famous, I want to be a professional athlete, and I want to be known throughout the world.
Okay.
And they were like, I remember my teacher looking at it and be like, okay, like pick something real.
Right.
And, you're female. Like, there's not a lot of successful female athletes, in my teacher's opinion. And I didn't really have anybody that I was looking up to at that time.
Okay.
I grew up with boys.
Yeah.
So I just, I was like, well, then I'm going to play in the CFL. Like, I just wanted to always challenge, the power of the female with being able to keep up with the boys.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So I always had this desire, That's why I always competed with my brother.
Okay.
I was like, if he can do it, then I can do it, and I'm going to do it better.
Yeah.
He didn't like it much, but like I loved it. It empowered me. Every time I was better than him, I was like, yes.
So, you go through this. At what age was that when your teacher was telling you? This is grade 2, you said?
Oh, yeah. So, grade 2. Pick a real career.
What a crazy thing, sorry to cut you off, for a primary education teacher to tell someone who's, 5, 6, 7 years old that they need to pick a quote-unquote real thing. Like, for anyone listening to this, I think you should be a fantastic example, and there's so many else out there. Like, that is so totally attainable, and whatever you put your mind to, you can realistically likely accomplish.
100%. Like you have to think, like, I grew up poor, no money. I had teachers look at me and say, this kid is going to be trouble. And to be honest, like, I wasn't guided well. Okay. And I was defiant. I was a bit of a delinquent.
Mm-hmm. Everyone has a phase.
Everybody has a phase, and I went through my phase. But sport ultimately was my babysitter, my guidance. It taught me to be punctual, it taught me to be respectful, it taught me all these values that I still carry with me today. And I think it's really unfortunate when teachers say to students, pick something more attainable, realistic, like a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. I love when kids are like, I want to be the first person to, like, I don't know, create something that no one's ever heard of before.
Yeah.
Like, I love that stuff because it's like, go for it. And at the time, like, I didn't know, like, I ended up in a sport that wasn't even an Olympic sport. And so I was saying I had nightmares. For a long time, like, I could have gone to the Olympics in Taekwondo. And I always wanted to be an Olympic athlete. I always wanted to go to the Olympics. And I'd have these nightmares of like, well, I made the wrong decision. And these nightmares didn't happen until later on in life, where I'm like, man, like, I'm in a sport now. I love it. I'm playing for Canada, but I can't go to like the height of my sport. Like for NHL players, it's probably the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
Because I know some NHL players that never get to a Stanley Cup, but that's the same with athletes within their sport. Like some players just never get to the Olympics, and that's just the biggest stage in the world for me as an athlete. And so I was like, man, I should have just stuck with it at this age. And then when it became an Olympic sport, it kind of just went full circle. So my dream that I had when I was a kid, like, I never let go of it. I just kind of put it to the side.
Right.
And I feel like that's really important for like our youth to hear, is that you can dream whatever you want to dream and you can achieve it, but you just may not achieve it when you want to achieve it. Like it's always just going to come when it's ready,
Yeah.
when you're ready to take it on. And that's something that I learned through my journey of being an Olympian is that dreams just don't happen when you want them to. They happen when they're ready to.
So true. So
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
So it was like, it came full circle for me. And you know, like you were saying earlier, like to win a gold at the Pan Am Games, which is the first for women's rugby to take place, especially in Toronto on home soil. You know, I remember it being a pretty big deal. Like they weren't going to broadcast it.
Wow.
Even though we were podium contenders at the Olympics and already qualified. And
What
I'm
a
like,
crazy.
like, how do you not, like, you're going to put other sports on,
Yeah.
but like, here's a new sport.
Yeah.
I feel like Canadians would fall in love with.
For sure.
You know, and I always said, like, we are Canada's biggest kept secret. We won second at the World Cup, which was another historic moment for women's rugby in history. And I remember making a big deal about it not being broadcasted.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, you know, you go to social media and you're like, they're not playing our game, blah, 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 blah. And then you make a big stink, and sure enough, they broadcast it.
As you should have. Like, kudos to you for doing that.
If no, people need to advocate for women's sport. And I feel like if it was in the eyes of people, they would see, like some people say, I actually enjoy women's rugby more than men's rugby, you know? So if we were to put women's sport in the eyes of audiences, of Canadians, you know, there's a good chance that they're like, I actually really like this.
Yeah.
You know, because there's that stigma that like women aren't as strong or as fast or as talented, and it's boring. But that's not the case, you know? So yeah, it was nice that they broadcasted it. It was a historic moment for us. And then we went to Rio and had no idea what was going on back in Canada because there's blackouts.
Whoa.
Yeah. So there was, like Rio ended up, I guess they turned off, like we weren't allowed to communicate, go on Twitter, nothing, Facebook. It was like a complete blackout. It was really weird.
And was that for all athletes?
Well, no, because I don't know if it was because of our SIM cards.
Okay.
Like Team Canada gave us SIM cards while we were in Rio.
Okay.
So we couldn't get any of the media that was being broadcasted in Canada. We could only see what was being broadcasted in Rio.
Wild.
It's so wild. So like we ended up, like prior to the Olympics, I was like, we're gonna win gold. Like we're gonna, you know, and we beat every team on the circuit, but not consistently.
Okay.
So like, could we win gold? You know,
There's a chance.
There's a chance. There's the same chance of me becoming an Olympian when I was, you know, little girl.
Yeah.
But I was like, we're gonna win gold. And then we got kicked out of the final. And we thought at that time, like, Canada's upset with us. Canada's so upset with us, we should just go home. We came here for gold, nothing else matters, let's just go home, you know? Our coach was like, just go play.
Yeah.
Just go play, that's why you guys are here, you know? It's just a bigger stage. And you've gotten this far, you might as well just, you know, just go have fun. Because the pressure of having to perform in such, like, especially at the Olympics, because it's every 4 years.
Yeah.
Like some people don't get to redo it, or they don't get another chance. I wasn't going to get another chance at it because of injuries and stuff like that. But some people, you know, succumb to the pressure, and some people rise. And because we put so much emphasis on the gold medal match, like we just shit the bed, like crazy.
I think, like to me, wrapping my head around Samuel Paidlow, who's a volleyball player up here in Scarborough, brought it up during his episode. He was 123. He talked about the fact that like this is 4 years, potentially 8, 12, you know, 2 decades worth of time, energy put into these, you know, what could be 40 minutes on the pitch.
Yeah.
For some people, it's one weight lift for like seconds of their life, and it all comes down to that. And if you don't, you know, how do you overcome something like that if you don't perform the way you know you could have?
I don't really have an answer for that because we achieved, like, we didn't achieve the gold, but when we won bronze, it felt like gold.
Yeah.
You know, so we did medal, and it worked out really well for us. But I also had teammates who didn't make the cut a month before. Like people who've been there since 2012. Like we all moved there. We all gave up everything to put all your eggs in one basket, and made every tour up until then and said, sorry, you didn't make the cut. And that devastated them.
Yeah.
So I witnessed what it did to players, but I've never personally experienced that. But it is devastating because, you're like, I just did this and what do I get? But I think once you retire out of the sport, you have a better perspective on things and a better appreciation from your experiences that you've experienced throughout your journey. So
no doubt. I love your babysitting analogy for sport. I'd never heard of it that way, but it makes total sense. Maybe as a negative connotation to me as like a younger individual, like being babysat, but it's so true. Time management, the discipline.
You got a coach, which is basically someone in power. You've got guidelines that you have to operate within, and because my dad couldn't afford a babysitter, and he was a guy that was in the the one league below the NHL. He played for the Ottawa 69ers.
Okay.
Yeah, so he was an athlete himself, and so he knew how important sport was and is, and he was like, I can't be there to guide you in life because I'm working so much, or else we're going to be homeless. So I'm going to try to put you into a sport when he could finally afford it, which, Taekwondo is very strict and regiment, and like, don't chew gum while you're running, and like, yes sir, yes ma'am, like you're learning this behavior, and basically, I would say like sport was my babysitter. It helped raise me to who I am, and you also learn to, you learn to operate with a diverse group of people in every sport that you join, and I think that's why it's so important. Like when I see kids who, like our youth, go into specific sports at such a young age, like let's take hockey, I find that there's a couple issues with that. Injuries, number one, because you're constantly doing one movement. Two, you're stuck with only that type of group of people.
Echo chamber.
What's that?
It becomes an echo chamber.
Yeah, like it's, and then you don't get the skills of other sports, so I really encourage kids and parents to encourage their kids to play multiple sports, so they get a diverse group of friends and they get to develop a bunch of skill sets, and they get to choose ultimately what they want to and specialize in later down the line.
Yeah, our goal with the Athletes podcast is to educate, entertain, and inspire the next generation of athletes. I've harped on it the past 3-4 episodes, probably the last 164 or 5 actually, to be honest, but like having multiple sports under your belt going through your youth is so important.
Yeah.
And whether it's hand-eye, it's coordination, agility, all of these skills add up. To your point, even being able to communicate, work with other people, like team sports versus individual, I think that is huge. Necessity to play both. It's like almost working a customer service job.
I have to say, like I always said, like if there's companies out there looking for employees, look for the athlete.
Yeah.
The athlete would be your best employee. They're punctual, they're respectful, they're hardworking, they're team-oriented. Yeah. More so the ones who come from a team. Like, because, you have like the track people, they have their team, but it's all about them.
Yeah.
Which, within rugby, like we get all types of people coming from all different types of sports. Yeah. We always say like we get the leftovers.
The athletic backgrounds that are just...
Yeah, it's like you're tall, but you're not like amazing at basketball, but you're really amazing at rugby because of your height and you have handling and all that. So that you're a superstar in rugby, but you're average in basketball. And so we get like such a diverse group of people. And I just, it's amazing when you get to learn from other people and to develop all these skills and take it into the workforce.
Yeah.
Like the workplace, because I don't think an athlete would ever let someone down.
Right?
I know,
I totally agree. One of the other things that you brought up is like the bronze medal almost feeling like the gold.
Yeah.
I know there's stats out there, and I should have looked this up beforehand, but like I feel like there's something around life expectancy between silver medalists and gold medalists and bronze medalists, and like gold and bronze living longer than the silver because of the depression, whatever is associated with losing that last match in that huge event that you've dreamed of your entire life.
Well, yeah. Well, you know what they say about silver. It's just like you had to lose to win it. Like you didn't win it. You lost. And then you're stuck with that loss. And I think as elite athletes or whoever is, you know, taking their sport very seriously, you never forget those losses.
Yeah.
And you carry it, especially at the Olympics.
Yeah.
You know, like, and I didn't know that, but it makes sense.
I think it's so important to suffer losses, maybe not at the Olympic level once you're at the peak of your career, but growing up, I feel like that was a factor for you, like for everyone, frankly, who's gone on to become successful professional athletes. Like they probably had to lose a lot growing up.
Oh yeah, but you know, even at that Olympic level, like it's important to lose sometimes.
Yeah.
And I say that because the world can be a really cruel place. And I don't think, you know, there's things in the world that can hurt you, but a loss at the Olympics, like that stings as an athlete. Or, you know, at the NHL when you fall short of the Stanley Cup, that also stings. But there's something to be said about going through adversity and using your pain as fuel. And being able to look back after you survive that and say, I can take on more.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts of the Eagles, who just lost the Super Bowl, I believe his quote was something along the lines of, it's not a matter of what happens with the losses, but what you learn from those losses.
What you do with them, yeah.
And I think that's like, I'm trying to find reoccurring themes over the past 3.5 years from these conversations, and one of the things that I need to harp on more is like, you know, for young athletes out there listening, it is important to lose in a sense. Like it is okay to lose, because as long as you're learning from those mistakes and those errors, in the long run, it's going to benefit you 10 times more than if you had won that game.
You can't win everything. You're not a robot. There's human error, right? And there's human experience with these errors, and it truly matters on how you respond. You know, like we have no control over how somebody shows up in our life, but we have control of how we react to it. And that's the same with winning and losing. If you're going to put everything on like winning, of like, if I don't win this, I'm not worth anything, like you're doing it wrong.
No. Results based versus process based.
You have to always be in the process. And like when we were getting ready for the Olympics, we never looked at the outcome, because if you always just focused in on the process, where it's minute by minute, and get the job done and stay within your role, the outcome will take care of itself.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's just like when you start, you know, we had a New Zealand coach come in and help us prior to the Olympics, and I love New Zealand rugby because they have such a culture there. Yeah. And they've been doing it for many, many years. And, you know, he had this philosophy of look down, not up. Okay. Basically, like, he ended up getting the New Zealand team to run sandhills. And he never told them how many they had to do, right? Yeah. And he said 100% every single time, you know? And it was like such a psychology kind of mind. And
mind blank.
Yeah. That you just didn't know when it was going to end. But if he told you that it was going to, you have 10 to do, like you're going to reserve yourself midway through. Because your body's really smart in how it uses its energy. And so he never told them, and they just kept going, and they were puking. And it was just like, his philosophy is just like, look down, not up, stay in the process, step by step. And you'll be able to achieve, like go past that mental barrier that our mind tries to protect us from. Yeah. Because once you hit that wall, like you're like, ah, man, that's too painful. I don't want to do it again. But then you have no choice. Yeah.
David Goggins had a group of people who were begging to come train with him one day, and like, yo, we want to run with you, we've been training, we do all this, they show it all. So he's like, you know what, screw it, I'll let them. They were persistent for, I think it was months, if not years. Yeah. And so they get out, they start running, they get to mile 20, whatever it is, and they were asking him how long they're going. He wouldn't tell them. So he left it indefinite. And it was that, at that moment, he knew he mind blanked them, and they were not going to be able to compete, because when you don't have that finish line in mind, it is very difficult to know. Again, your body's smart. Yeah. And it's not in a case where it wants to continue to push at that 100%.
you know, it's interesting. We did a thing called SEAL Fit prior to the Olympics.
Okay.
So Navy SEALs from the US, they started a thing called SEAL Fit, where it was the 20X challenge. And they would, for 3 days, push somebody mentally and physically beyond their capabilities. Like mentally break you down. That's what they do at the Navy SEALs, right? They want to know who can withstand whatever comes their way. And they would take the college guys for the NFL quarterbacks, and they would put them into this SEAL Fit training.
Okay.
And try to see who is mentally tough. Because the NFL coaches wanted mentally tough quarterbacks.
Right.
Okay. So our coaches got wind of this and was like, this sounds like an amazing opportunity for you guys, because the Olympics is another level of energy that you get, from the pressure to the stadium to, it's just, there's so much on the line, and you have to be able to control those emotions and stay within the process. So let's do 20X challenge. And they took us out in the middle of nowhere in BC. They took our phones, took our watches, they took everything. And they gave us white t-shirts, and we had our last names on it. So these 3 SEAL Fit guys knew who we were. And like the head guy, like he topped his class in buds.
Okay.
He was these guys were scary.
Yeah.
These guys were scary. Black sunglasses, like dead face. They didn't mess around. And you're like, okay, like I'm here to be an athlete, and I feel like I just entered the army. Like, what are we doing here? And our coaches were like, you're fine, you're fine. And I'm like, okay. And they, for 3 days straight, minimal sleep, minimal food, pushed us physically and mentally. And people broke down, people cried, and they also wanted to find out who the leader was. Even though I was the leader, they were like, sure, your coach nominated you as a leader, and yes, your teammates follow you, but like, are you really a leader? It was such an experience. So when we got to the Olympics, with where they pushed us mentally, like we were ready to take that loss from the gold medal. Like I feel like that really prepared us to be able to handle that, and then, you know, get our spirits back up and win a bronze.
I can't even imagine going through something like that. I feel like one day, as we continue to have conversations like this, it might end up happening. I get competitive, so I want to try stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how I'll handle it. We'll see how it goes. We'll probably video it. But you talk about being a leader. You end up on Canada's Ultimate Challenge.
Yeah.
Greatest Challenge. I can't remember the name. I'm bad with it. But you're up with athletes like Donovan Bailey, other coaches. Luke Wilson's on Family Feud with you. Like, you get all this TV media exposure after your career, like the transition from athlete to now influencer, almost, you would say. Like, how's that been? I'm curious.
So I guess like when I retired, it was very abrupt.
Okay.
I was supposed to go to Commonwealth Games, and I was projected to go to Tokyo 2020. But I had a lot of injuries, and basically I was like, risk versus reward. Do I really need more historic moments under my belt?
Right.
You know, do I need another Olympics? Like, that was really stressful for me. I don't know if I can handle going to the Olympics and not walking away with a medal.
Right.
And then there was a quiet period in my life where I was like, what am I going to do? You know, I lost my sponsors. I lost my contract. And I was like, man, I need a job now. You know, and I kind of had a plan. Like, I was going to open up my own personal training business and train clients. And I love helping people. And so that's what I did. And then it wasn't until I met my wife. She's a singer. She's a Juno nominee singer. And basically, when we combined our worlds, it was just like an explosion of, like, you know, my fame in Edmonton, and, you know, with what she was, with her dream of pursuing like you know, she wants to be a Grammy Award winner, but she's building, right?
Yeah.
She's like living her dream, and I completed my dream, and we combined our worlds. And you know, she came out with an EP, and she was on ET Canada, and then they're like, well, we love you too. And like CBC kind of knew, you know, the media already knew who I was. And so we started doing interviews together, and long story short, I got back into the public eye because I kind of went underground for a bit.
Okay.
You know, like through like a little bit of a depression of like, who am I and what am I doing? Because my like identity was wrapped up in rugby for so long, you know, and then it was also my outlet to deal with like life. And so once rugby was not a thing, I was like, oh my God, identity crisis, which I feel like a lot of athletes go through. You don't think that you will, but when you lose the thing you love, for whatever reason, you got to find new ways to live, new outlets, a new community, you know, you go through FOMO, you go through all these emotions. And when I got back into the public eye, when I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing speaking engagements again, and I'm going to start being open again to the world. And my wife was like so encouraging of that. And Canada's Ultimate Challenge, one of the producers, I don't really know how they got wind, but like Shawnee was doing a lot of CBC work. And it's a CBC show, and they reached out and was like, we think you'd be a good fit for this show. And so I was like, yeah, okay. So I went away for 5 weeks filming, and it was 6 celebrity coaches, like Donovan Bailey, Claire Hughes, Luke Wilson, Wanique, and who's a water polo and Olympian, and then there's Gilmore. You know, we all come from our different sporting backgrounds, and we have to coach like the everyday Canadian, and there's a lot of them are like fitness influencers, firefighters. They're active, they are athletes in their own right. And I'm like the type of person, like when I was training my clients, like I'm gonna bring you to the Olympic level,
right?
You know, like I'm gonna bring you up a level because I don't know how to come down.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just one way, and so you know, with my team, it was like Team Gay with an ally. Like they gave me 3 gays and 1 straight, and I was like, this is perfect.
Yeah.
You know, spoke the same language. It was great, and they were, you know, they all had different strengths and skill sets, and I really treated them like a rugby team. Okay. You know, and you look at the other teams, and some other teams were more stacked, I guess. And it was really interesting because you're traveling around for 5 weeks with all these strangers with different personalities and skill sets, and they're there for their own different reasons. And having to make everybody on one page was probably the hardest thing in the entire world for me. Because like in rugby, you're there for rugby, and you're there to win a medal or achieve to the team common goal. But when you're at Canada's Ultimate Challenge, like people are there for like, some are there for reality TV, like there to cause some shit, and there's some people there to just challenge themselves or say I can, and the competitiveness was different amongst individuals, and it was to lead them was a challenge. It was such a challenge, and one of my players didn't like to be yelled at. And I'm not a yeller, but I have to tell you, in one of the episodes, I let it fly. And I was like, why are you making me do this? I don't take it back. I don't. I own that. But
it's your job as a coach to also understand maybe what the athlete needs in that moment.
Yes. You know, it's as athletes, like as an athlete, I always was like, I know what I need, and I know where I want to go. And what I thought I needed or what I wanted wasn't actually what I needed. And there was a big difference in that. And my coach was able to see things like that. And that's something I took from my coach into coaching these individuals was like, you know, I had one player say, like, this challenge is for me. And I'm like, but what's good for you may not be what's good for the team.
Right.
And I'm thinking long game, not just what's good for you.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's good for you, but it may not be good for the team. And we all have to learn to be like on a team and operate like a team, because we're going to win as a team. Yeah. It's like a fist. Yeah. You know, like your hands open as individuals, you're going to crumble. You work together, you have a fist. You know, it can't be broken. Yeah. So it was wild. Reality TV is so wild. I would do it again.
Yeah.
I would do it again.
What was like more difficult? Family Feud, pressing that button, Canada's Ultimate Challenge. Differences.
I have to say, like, the whole button pushing, like, before somebody else was pretty stressful. I was sweating.
You were getting intense.
Oh, yeah, I even forgot to shake your hand at the beginning. I was just, like, so in the athlete zone. It's a thing. The athlete zone is a thing, and I don't know if she really understood that. She was like, wait a minute, it's a game show. And I was like, no, this is a game. This is a game, and we're here to win, and we're a bunch of athletes who are like competitive. You can't play Monopoly with us. You can't play board games. It's just like we're those types of people. Yeah. But Canada's Ultimate Challenge was definitely a challenge because there was obstacles that these individuals had to compete in that I had no knowledge of. Like, it's not a spoiler, but in one of the challenges, there is a mathematical challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at math.
Okay.
And I am just dreading the day that that episode comes out because I'm like trying to do math and I'm like, okay, that's not my strong suit at all. And so I was like, rugby didn't help me with math. Like, I know how to direct people when it comes to rugby plays, but when it comes to like obstacle courses on how to attack balance beams and stuff like that, I mean, I'm on the same level as my athletes. I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to pretend to know and then try to guide you.
I'm going to inject some confidence into you.
I'm going to say that you can do it, even though I don't think I can. You know what I mean? Like I looked at these challenges like, I can't do it. I don't know. I don't even know if I can do it. And I'm pretty athletic and fit. And then, but I always said to my athletes, like, no matter what the challenge was, even if they're like, I can't do it, I'm like, you can do it.
Yeah.
You instill this confidence in the people you're working with. And that's something I did as an athlete, as a captain on the team, is like, I always thought that I was better than my opponents.
Right.
Even like on paper, I wasn't. Even though every time I was up against them, sometimes they beat me, I still thought, I'm better than you.
Yeah.
Because like, I'm going to be my own hype person, especially in those moments.
And the power of visualization is legit. Like Aaron Volpatti, who we had on the show a couple months ago, like suffered third-degree burns on 40% of his body, and within 3 months was playing hockey again.
Oh, no way.
Like, so I think like when you bring up that like energy, the desire, the belief that like, hey, I'm better than this person, like it resonates, and I think people can tell. And I was curious, you bring up the New Zealand athletes training over there with their coach. Like, you've also got some tattoos. If people are watching on YouTube, they will see that. But was that almost an intimidation factor as well when you got on the pitch, where people, like, because you've got a very soft, nice, outspoken personality, but then maybe on the surface people are slightly intimidated?
The image doesn't correlate with the voice, and I like when I am walking somewhere, like I look strong, I look intimidating, and people judge it, especially older people, like who, tattoos are very popular now, but back in the day they weren't.
Yeah.
Especially like the neck tattoo. You know how many people were like, don't get the neck tattoo? And my wife was the only one who was like, you should do it. And I was like, yeah, okay. I only need your support and I only care about your opinion, so I'm going to do it. When I was getting my tattoos, like it wasn't like I'm going to intimidate people by them. It was my way to express my human experiences. They all mean something to me. It's the same way of a singer writing songs, telling their stories. So every tattoo, I'm covered like from top to bottom, and they all have stories. And it just so happened that with my blonde hair and my tattoos, it created this image that made me stand out. And along with my skill set on the field and how good I was, like I had this package, and it worked out well for me because people remember that. Yeah. They remembered the tattoo with the blonde hair that hit hard. Right. Whatever it was. But I definitely, I think people were intimidated by the tattoos. But then when I tried not to talk. I tried not to talk to nobody, especially my opponents. I didn't want them to know that I was soft, like inside. Yeah. So I used it. I used it to my advantage. Yeah. I looked at them and I was like, I'm coming for you. And I would just like mouth it though. Yeah. I wouldn't use my voice. I was like, interesting. Yeah. Wow.
One of the other things we talked about before we started to record was injuries.
Yeah.
You faced a ton of them over your career. You wanted to bring up how important it was for young athletes to be able to overcome them. Adjust.
Yeah, so I always got asked, like, is there anything that you would change in your athletic career? And for the longest time, I was like, no, I don't regret anything, and no, I did it perfectly. But, when you step away from your sport and you have, like, another perspective, like a fresh perspective on it, the one thing that I would go back and do differently was take care of my injuries. And I find, like, I probably, would have been as much pain as I am now on the daily, and I would have probably had a longer career. And I was really rough with my body, and I took my body for granted, and my youth, You know, I didn't warm up properly. Even as a kid, when I was, on the senior team at 17 years old, I would see the older athletes who were 30 warming up for like an hour.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm going to sit here and eat my ice cream and then I'm going to go play, I'm like, I don't understand why they're doing that. And then I was 30, taking like 2 hours to warm up. Like, because I had no choice, because my body just wouldn't move.
Right.
And I roll out of bed and I'm like, I am so stiff. And I've occurred so many injuries, from a broken kneecap to a broken hip, torn labrums. Like, I've broken a lot of bones, tore a lot of things, and I didn't heal a certain injury properly because I was so concerned with getting back on field and not missing an opportunity. And it is true that, had I not pushed through certain injuries, I may have missed the selection, right?
Fair enough.
And I think that's the fear with athletes, where they're like, I can't, if I'm sitting on the bench, somebody else is going to take that opportunity, and they may have a really good game, and then I may be on the bench.
Yeah.
And the hardest thing for an athlete to do is not play. So, if you are a kid out there who is a athlete, please take care of your body, because you will thank yourself, you will thank your future self 15 years from now. And
5 years from now.
5 years from 2 years from now.
Yeah.
It's definitely, like, my wife, she had laryngitis just recently. She had to cancel 3 shows. Oof. But the day she had and I find singers too, singers have to treat their bodies the same way as athletes do.
For sure.
It's a muscle.
Yeah.
And she had a show in Calgary at the orchestra, and she flew there, and she's like, I can't, my throat hurts. I was like, maybe you shouldn't sing this one. And she's like, no, I'm going to do it. I don't want to let all these people, it was like a 60-piece orchestra, you know? It was a big show. And she's like, I have to. There's so many people relying on me. And I was like, oh, okay. She flew to Calgary. She did a rehearsal. She pushed through it. And then 4 hours later, she had no voice. Oh. And so the show had to be canceled. So then she had a show the next week. And she was like, I have to do this. I can't cancel another show. And I was like, no, you have to cancel it. Like, just because your throat is feeling better doesn't mean you're healed, And so she canceled that, and then she had to cancel her 3rd one. And she's like, I could sing. And I was like, longevity.
Yeah, long game.
Long game. And I find, like, rarely do we ever think about the long game, because we're thinking about all the opportunities that we're missing out in that moment. And some of them are pretty good and big, and they could come with a lot of reward. But that also could end your career. Like, I had one, I don't know who said this to me, but, like, one practice isn't going to make your career, but it could break your career. Or one game.
So true.
Yeah. So longevity, it's the long game, and the longer you play, the more opportunities you have.
Yeah. What training, nutrition, diet would you be recommending for people growing up as athletes? Are they training high reps, low volume? Is it nutrition? Like, what would you be suggesting? I think it's all in relative to the sport they're playing. Right.
There is no one diet fits all. I think, even as a personal trainer, like, I always have people come to me and they're like, okay, I need a diet. Like, does this diet work? And I'm like, every diet works.
It's a tool.
It's a tool, but does it work with your lifestyle? And that's the same with athletes. Like, obviously you want a well-balanced meal, right? More so fuel your body with, like, nutritious stuff, opposed to chips and pops and things that are just, like, empty calories is kind of what we call them. And you got to treat your body like a temple. You only have one body this life. And you have to treat it like a temple, and you have to be kind to it, because as you get older, like, your choices, nutrition-wise, may not affect you in that moment. 20, 30, 40 years from now, you're going to be paying the price.
Yeah.
And I always think about the long game, even with our, like, the insides, Yeah. You, like, treat your body properly so you can live the life you want to live 60 years from now. Yeah. Don't be so... like nearsighted.
Yeah.
Like, and plus, like, if you fuel your body properly, like, you wouldn't put shit gas in a Ferrari.
No.
Would you?
No.
God, I wouldn't either. That engine would choke up real quick with its pistons or whatever the hell it has in it. You know, like you wouldn't do that. You would put the proper fuel in the car so it's running at its peak performance, and that's what you need to do as an athlete. And so I can't specifically say what types of food they should eat or what that should look like because it's in relative to the sport they're playing. But I can say it's not chips and it's not pop and it's not candy.
Do you do any sauna, ice bath? Were there any of those recovery methods that help with injuries?
Yeah. So in 2013, right before the World Cup, we went to Poland, and Poland was the only country at the time that had cryo chambers.
Okay.
And it's not like you see now where your head can like stick out of it that the NHL players are using. It was like a chamber. And you went into this one chamber that had like, it was like minus, 100 degrees or whatever. And then you went, and it prepped you for the actual chamber, which was black. It was dark, and you had to wear like cloth and wood shoes and stuff to protect you.
Wow.
It was the most bizarre outfit too. Like, it was really weird. And then they put you in this chamber for 2 minutes. And if you're claustrophobic, it's like not a place you want to be. But I remember I ended up hurting my shin really bad where I couldn't walk. And we were doing the cryo chamber 3 times a day. And I think I even had a little fracture. And by the time that the World Cup, which was a month, it was like 2 weeks maybe until we went to the World Cup, and I was like, I'm not gonna be able to play. But it helped.
Wow.
Yeah, it helped, because I guess what the cryo chamber does is like it stops the lactic acid buildup, so you can push harder for longer and recover faster. And that's one of the things that we did for recovery. And some of the other types of trainings that we did when we played in hot climates, we would go train in saunas.
Okay.
We'd cycle in saunas
Yeah.
to get acclimatized prior to getting there.
That would have been fun.
It was wild. You actually had to swallow a temperature pill. And then they'd come to you and they would put it on your stomach and make sure that you're at a certain temperature so you don't get dehydrated. And you had to drink a certain amount of water, and very science-based. Sport is very science-based now, and it's pretty crazy of how sport has evolved since, the 1940s.
Yeah, now you got guys like Huberman Lab putting stuff out there on a weekly basis on everything and anything to do with sports science and getting that 0.1% better, right?
Well,
it can make a difference.
That makes, especially at the Olympic level, like that does make a difference. People lost by like 0.1 second. So yeah, those things do make a difference, and I think it's also very fascinating to be, when I was playing, the guinea pig of all this science.
I'm loving it. I get to be a guinea pig with some of the people we chat with, go to, train with. It's fun. I'm like very excited for the next 10, 20 years. What we're going to be.
Oh my God, I can't wait to see where your podcast is going to be and who you have on next.
Well. Hey, it's going to be fun because you're along for the journey now. You're a part of it. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. The way we wrap up every episode is we ask our guests what their biggest piece of advice would be for the next gen. I feel like you've already kind of done that with the body, longevity.
Yeah.
So I want to pivot and ask you what suggestions you would have for female athletes connecting with brands. As someone who's gone from national team Canada member, captain, to now post-career, still flourishing in the media, sport, brand game, I think you could probably add some value to the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I've had brands turn me away based off of what I look like. Okay. Like Under Armour. So Under Armour came to our team and was like, we're looking for an athlete, a female athlete, for our clothing brand. Well, I don't wear female clothes. And they were looking for what the average Canadian looked like, so it normalized with the people who were buying the clothes, which I found so narrow-sighted. Like, you know what I mean?
Extremely.
But like, it was kind of weird. So anybody, if you're an athlete and you are wanting to associate with a brand, my number one recommendation is like, make sure you do your research on the brand and make sure that it aligns with your values. Because I find that if you're sitting in a room with a bunch of suits, and they have the same values as you do, then the connection's gonna be there, and then you're going to naturally promote this brand and develop a relationship with the company. And I know that a lot of companies are looking for male athletes because the sport is more out there. Mm-hmm. But, I've contacted My Smile, which is a teeth whitening brand.
Yeah.
They have nothing to do with rugby. But I use their product. And I shot them a message and I was like, do you want to collaborate? Do you want to, and that's all it takes is just ask. If there's a brand out there that you want to be a part of, ask. And if they say no, you're just asking the wrong person. Go to somebody else and ask them and tell them why you want to be a part of that brand. And plead your case. Like, there's no, remove the ego.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And if they're looking for a guy, then that's not a brand that you're going to want to be a part of.
Love that. I love this conversation.
Yeah,
so insightful.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Where can people find you on social media so that they can continue following your journey?
You can find me on Instagram, just Jen Kish.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then it's Chantel Kish on TikTok.
Shawnee Kish on TikTok.
Shawnee Kish.
Yeah, I'm not on a lot of platforms, but
and your new podcast.
Oh, and we came out with a new podcast called Straightforward with the Gays, and debuts March 10th of 2023.
Yes.
Where we talk about everything gay and straightforward.
So there's tons to talk about.
There's tons. There's not a specific. Yeah, we don't want to box ourselves.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Ben.
I just want to say thank you for watching this episode of the Athletes Podcast. It means the world to me that you're consuming our content. If you think it could help someone else, I'd really appreciate it if you shared it with them, told them about the Athletes Podcast. That's the only way we continue to grow. Don't forget about our athletes agreement. Simple, subscribe, means the world to us. Our video and editor is Phoenix Wayland. Our website and app producer is Jordan Maslin. I'm David Stark, your host of the Athletes Podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. This episode was sponsored by Rooted, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.